Help me, claim me tonight. The rancher did it, and that night stayed with them. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. Everything about this place felt so different from the city she had left behind. The air smelled of earth and hay, the wind carried the scent of animals, and the horizon seemed endless. She was here to work at a ranch for the summer, a temporary job that would help her save money, but more than that, she wanted a change, a break from the predictable rhythm of her old life. The bus had let her off at a small dirt clearing near the entrance to the ranch. There were no streets, no traffic, only the faint sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the occasional creak of a windmill. Clara looked around, trying to find the main house or any sign of people, but all she saw were wide open fields, fenced pastures, and a few outbuildings scattered across the land. Her heart beat faster, not out of fear exactly, but from the unfamiliarity of it all. She adjusted the strap of her bag and started walking toward the largest building in sight. The ranch house was large, made of weathered wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. The sun's rays glinted off the windows, and a few rocking chairs sat empty, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. Clara approached the porch carefully. She had heard stories about ranchers before. Some were friendly, some were strict, and some carried reputations that made people wary. She reminded herself she didn't know which kind this one would be. The job was simple: help with chores, feed animals, repair fences, and generally learn the rhythms of ranch life. She had never done any of these things before, but she was determined to try. Before she could knock on the door, it opened from the side, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with strong hands that seemed built for work. His hair was dark, streaked with gray, and his skin had the deep tan of someone who spent long hours in the sun. His eyes were sharp, almost piercing, and when he looked at her, Clara felt a strange mix of curiosity and apprehension. "You must be Clara," he said in a voice that was low and steady, carrying just enough authority to make her straighten her posture. He extended a hand and she shook it, noticing the firmness of his grip. "I'm Jacob, I run this place," Clara nodded. "Yes, sir, I'm here to work for the summer. I hope I can be helpful." Jacob studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll see. Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be staying and what you'll be doing first." She followed him across the yard, past the corral where horses shifted restlessly, their hooves clattering on the wooden fence. Clara had never been around animals like this before. She had grown up in the city, where the nearest farm was miles away, and the most she knew about horses came from movies. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness, knowing she had a lot to learn. Jacob led her to a small cabin a short distance from the main house. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a small table, and a wooden chair. A window looked out onto the fields, where the last light of the sun painted everything gold. Clara set her suitcase down and looked around. The cabin smelled faintly of pine and dust, the kind of scent that seemed to belong to a place that had been lived in for years. "You'll sleep here," Jacob said. "There's running water and the bathroom is just down the path. We eat in the main house. I'll have dinner ready in about an hour. You should wash up before then." Clara nodded, still feeling the weight of the day's travel and the unfamiliarity of the place. She unpacked a few essentials, hung up her clothes, and then stepped outside to take a deep breath. The sky had turned a deep shade of blue, and stars were beginning to appear, one by one. The quiet of the countryside was almost overwhelming compared to the constant noise of the city. She could hear crickets chirping, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, and faintly, the distant lowing of cows. Dinner was simple but hearty. Jacob introduced her to the other workers, a mix of local farmhands and a few seasonal helpers like herself. They were friendly enough, though most kept conversation to polite greetings and small talk. Clara noticed that Jacob often stayed quiet, observing more than speaking, and whenever their eyes met, she felt a brief, almost electric moment of recognition, though she quickly looked away. After dinner, Jacob suggested she take a walk to get familiar with the land. Clara walked along the fence line, marveling at how vast the property was. The ranch stretched beyond what she could see, fields rolling into the distance, dotted with animals grazing peacefully. She felt a mixture of freedom and isolation. It was exhilarating but also a little lonely. She thought of the city, of her friends, of the constant rush of life she had left behind. And yet here, in this quiet place, there was a strange sense of possibility. As the night deepened, she returned to her cabin. The air had cooled, and a gentle breeze drifted through the open window. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about her first day, about Jacob, and about the challenges that lay ahead. She felt excitement mingled with nervousness. This was not a city apartment, not a predictable schedule. This was work under the sun, learning skills she didn't yet have, living alongside people she barely knew, and navigating a world completely different from her own. She lay down, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the soft steps of animals in the distance, the creak of a fence swaying in the wind, the occasional call of a night bird. Sleep was slow to come, her mind buzzing with thoughts and anticipation. There was a sense that this summer would change her, that these days on the ranch would leave marks on her that she couldn't yet understand. Hours later, she drifted into a restless sleep, the last thing she remembered being the soft glow of moonlight over the fields and the faint, steady rhythm of life on the ranch. It was quiet yet full of life, and somewhere in the distance, she felt the presence of Jacob watching over the land, a figure as solid and enduring as the hills themselves. Clara didn't know it yet, but this first day was only the beginning. The ranch was a place of hard work, unexpected connections, and moments that would stay with her long after she left. She would face challenges, learn about herself, and encounter feelings she hadn't anticipated. And all of it had begun with a simple bus ride, a dusty road, and the golden light of a countryside she had never known, where the night air held both mystery and promise. The next morning, Clara woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the cabin window. The air smelled fresh and earthy, carrying the faint aroma of hay and dew-soaked grass. She could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the gentle clatter of horses moving in their pens. Clara stretched, feeling both nervous and excited about the day ahead. Today, she would begin her real work on the ranch. After a quick breakfast in the main house, Clara followed Jacob outside. The ranch was already alive with activity. Workers moved swiftly, tending to animals, checking fences, and loading feed into wheelbarrows. The sounds of hooves, voices, and machinery filled the morning air. Clara watched for a moment, taking it all in. It was a world so different from the quiet, orderly streets she had left behind, a place where life moved according to the needs of the land and the animals, not according to clocks and schedules. Jacob handed her a pair of gloves. "We'll start simple," he said. "Feed the animals and check the fences. Then we'll see how you handle some of the heavier chores." His voice was calm but firm, and Clara found herself paying close attention to every word. Her first task was feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs. At first she felt awkward, unsure how to move quickly without startling the birds. But Jacob stayed nearby, guiding her with quiet patience. He showed her how to carry the feed without spilling, how to collect eggs gently so they didn't break, and how to keep a watchful eye on the animals. Clara began to feel a sense of accomplishment, small as it was, as she managed to complete the task without any mistakes. Next came the horses. Jacob led her to the stable, where a few of the larger horses were waiting. Clara had never been close to such animals before. They were massive, their muscles rippling under their sleek coats, their eyes dark and intelligent. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. Jacob watched her as she brushed the horses, showing her how to move her hands in long, steady strokes. "They can sense fear," he said. "Stay calm and they'll respect you." Clara did her best, talking softly to the animals and moving slowly. By the time they were done, she felt a little braver, more confident in her ability to handle something so foreign to her. Jacob gave her a small nod of approval, and for a moment she felt a flicker of pride. The day continued with the constant rhythm of work. They repaired broken fences, moved feed bales, and checked on the cows in the distant pastures. Clara's hands ached from lifting and carrying, but she didn't mind. Each task, no matter how tiring, gave her a sense of purpose. She was learning, and with each lesson she felt more connected to the land and to the life of the ranch. Throughout the day, Clara noticed how Jacob moved. He was efficient, strong, and careful, yet there was an ease to him, a natural command over the work and the animals. He spoke little, but when he did, it was always clear and deliberate. Clara couldn't help but notice his attention. Sometimes, when she was struggling with a task, she would catch him watching her, not judging but observing. And she would feel a strange warmth, as if she were being silently supported. At lunchtime, they all gathered under a shaded area near the barn. The workers ate simple food, sandwiches, fresh fruit, and water, but it tasted more satisfying than anything Clara had eaten in the city. The conversation was easy, the workers sharing stories of past summers, their families, and the quirks of ranch life. Clara listened, contributing when she could, feeling a little more at ease with each passing moment. She began to understand that the ranch was not just a workplace but a small community, each person contributing to the life of the land in their own way. As the afternoon heat pressed down, they returned to chores. Jacob took her to a section of the fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. Clara had watched him repair fences before, but now it was her turn to try. He explained carefully how to remove the broken boards, secure the posts, and align the wire. Clara struggled at first, unsure of her strength and coordination. But Jacob stayed close, offering guidance when needed, his calm presence giving her courage. By the end of the day, the sun was low again, casting long shadows across the fields. Clara was exhausted, her arms sore and her back tired, but she felt a deep satisfaction. She had survived the first full day of ranch work and had even learned a few new skills. Jacob gave her a brief nod of approval as they walked back toward the house. "You did well," he said simply. Clara smiled a little shyly, feeling proud. That evening after dinner, Clara returned to her cabin. She sat by the window, watching the stars appear one by one. The sky was vast and open, so different from the city, where buildings and lights often blocked the view. She felt a deep sense of peace, mixed with a quiet anticipation. There was something about the ranch, about the rhythm of life here, that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't expected. Yet, she couldn't ignore the strange tension she felt around Jacob. He was kind and patient, but there was an intensity to him that she couldn't quite understand. Every glance, every brief word exchanged seemed to carry more weight than it should. Clara found herself thinking about him more than she wanted, her curiosity mixing with a quiet caution. She reminded herself to focus on the work, to learn and adapt, not to be distracted by feelings she didn't fully understand. The nights on the ranch were quiet but full of small sounds, the soft breathing of animals, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of owls. Clara lay in bed, replaying the day in her mind. She thought of the animals she had cared for, the skills she had begun to learn, and the way Jacob had silently guided her. There was a sense that she was entering a new world, one that demanded patience, strength, and attentiveness. She knew she had much to learn, but the thought didn't scare her. It excited her. Over the next few days, Clara settled into a routine. Mornings began before sunrise, with chores that required focus and effort. She learned how to lead horses, repair fences, feed the livestock, and even ride a horse across the open fields. Each day brought new challenges, and with each challenge she grew more confident. Jacob remained quiet but observant, offering guidance when necessary and occasionally giving her brief words of encouragement. The other workers began to accept her as part of the team. She shared small moments of laughter with them, exchanged stories about city life, and learned about their families and backgrounds. Despite the differences in their lives, they shared a common purpose: the ranch, the animals, and the work that kept everything running. Clara began to feel a sense of belonging she had not anticipated. Yet, no matter how busy she was, she could not escape the quiet awareness of Jacob's presence. He was always there, moving through the work with steady hands and sharp eyes. Sometimes, when she was fixing a fence or leading a horse, she would catch him watching, and a subtle awareness would pass between them. It was not words but a feeling, a shared understanding that there was something unspoken between them, something that neither fully acknowledged but that lingered in the air. By the end of the first week, Clara realized that life on the ranch was more than just physical labor. It required attention, patience, and a willingness to observe and adapt. She began to appreciate the small rhythms of the day, the early morning light, the sound of animals moving in the fields, the quiet moments before the sun fully rose. She began to understand why people stayed on the ranch, why some never left, and why the work, though hard, was fulfilling in ways she had never imagined. Clara also began to notice the quiet moments between the work. A shared smile with a horse, a brief conversation with Jacob about the tasks, a moment of silence watching the sunset. These moments felt charged with meaning, subtle but powerful. She didn't understand it fully, but she felt it deeply. There was a connection forming, one that was slow and deliberate, built on trust, respect, and shared effort. By the end of her second week, Clara could move confidently through the ranch. She knew the layout of the fields, the habits of the animals, and the pace of the work. Jacob's presence, once intimidating, now felt familiar, though it still carried an intensity that made her heart race. She realized she was no longer just a visitor on the ranch. She was part of its rhythm, part of its life, and part of its story. As the sun set on another long day, Clara stood outside her cabin, watching the colors change across the sky. She felt a mix of exhaustion, pride, and anticipation. Life on the ranch was demanding, yes, but it was also rich and full of lessons she could not have learned anywhere else. And though she did not yet understand the depth of her feelings, she sensed that the experiences she was living now would stay with her for a long time, shaping her in ways she could not yet see. The ranch was alive, not just with animals or work, but with possibility, connection, and unspoken tension. And Clara, in her quiet determination and curiosity, had begun to find her place within it. Clara had been on the ranch for nearly 2 weeks now, and she felt herself becoming more comfortable with the routines, the work, and even the vast, quiet spaces that had seemed so intimidating at first. She woke up early each morning, feeling the fresh chill of dawn on her skin, and gradually learned to move with the rhythm of the land. The animals, once strange and unpredictable, now seemed to respond to her presence. Horses nickered as she approached, cows turned their heads toward her with calm recognition, and even the chickens seemed to settle around her more easily. It was a small triumph, but one that filled her with quiet pride. Jacob continued to observe her closely, though he remained largely silent. There was a way he moved that made everything seem effortless. The way he could lift a heavy bale of hay with ease, calm a restless horse with a single word, or repair a broken fence in moments. Clara found herself studying him, fascinated by his skill, and she realized that she had begun to trust him more than she expected. When he gave instructions, she followed them without hesitation, knowing that he had seen more of life and work than she ever would. One late afternoon, Jacob asked her to help him in a part of the ranch she had not explored before, a series of paddocks tucked away behind a small grove of trees. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields, and the air smelled of earth, grass, and distant wildflowers. Clara followed him, curious and a little anxious. She had noticed that Jacob seemed to have a different energy when he was working on this part of the ranch, more relaxed, almost gentle, and she found herself drawn to it. "This section hasn't been used much this season," Jacob explained. "We need to clear some old brush and check the fences. The horses here haven't had much attention, so we need to make sure they're comfortable." Clara nodded, taking a deep breath. The work was harder than she expected. The brush was thick, the ground uneven, and the fences required careful attention. But Jacob stayed close, offering guidance and demonstrating how to move efficiently without harming herself or the animals. As they worked side by side, Clara began to notice the subtle ways he observed her. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it was to offer a suggestion or a brief word of encouragement. She felt a strange mixture of comfort and tension in his presence, an awareness that made her heart beat a little faster than normal. When she hesitated, unsure how to lift a heavy post, he stepped forward, his hands brushing hers as he guided her movement. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but it left a warmth lingering in her skin. Clara shook her head slightly, trying to focus on the work, but she couldn't completely ignore the feeling. By mid-afternoon, they had made significant progress. The paddocks were cleared, the fences secured, and the horses had been fed and checked for injuries. Clara was sweaty and tired, her arms sore from lifting and bending, but there was a sense of accomplishment that outweighed the fatigue. She had learned more in a few hours than she had expected, and she realized that she was starting to understand the rhythm of ranch life in a way she had never imagined. Jacob finally stepped back, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "You're doing well," he said simply, his voice carrying a calm authority that made Clara stand a little straighter. She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest, not just from pride, but from the attention he had given her. It was subtle, quiet, but meaningful, and she found herself wanting to impress him, to show that she was capable of handling the work and the responsibilities of the ranch. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Jacob suggested they take a break. They sat on the edge of the fence, looking out across the fields as the sky turned shades of orange and pink. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward, and Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. "You've adapted quickly," Jacob said after a few minutes. "Most people struggle for weeks before they feel confident here. You handle it well." Clara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you," she replied softly. "I'm learning. It's different, but I like it. I like being outside, working with the animals. It feels real." Jacob nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. There was something in the way he looked at her, a quiet intensity, and Clara felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with curiosity. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she was aware of it, and she couldn't deny the effect it had on her. After a while, they returned to the main house for dinner. The meal was simple but satisfying, and the conversation was light. Clara found herself enjoying the camaraderie of the workers, sharing stories of city life, and listening to their experiences on the ranch. She realized that she had begun to feel like part of the team, not just an outsider or temporary worker. The ranch was becoming a place she could imagine staying in, at least for the summer, and the thought brought a strange comfort. That evening, after the others had gone to their cabins, Clara stayed behind to clean and organize some of the equipment they had used. Jacob was checking supplies nearby, and she noticed him glancing in her direction more than once. There was a quiet awareness between them now, a sense that they both knew something unspoken was building, though neither acknowledged it directly. Clara felt a mix of excitement and caution, unsure how to interpret the attention or what it might mean. When she finished her tasks, she stepped outside, the air cool and crisp as the sun finally disappeared behind the hills. The stars were beginning to twinkle, and the night felt alive with sound. The soft rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the occasional lowing of cows. Clara walked toward the edge of the pasture, taking a moment to breathe deeply and appreciate the quiet beauty of the night. Jacob joined her silently, standing a few feet away. They didn't speak at first, just watched the stars together. There was a strange comfort in the silence, a sense that they were sharing a private moment despite the vastness of the land around them. Clara felt a mixture of nervousness and intrigue. She didn't fully understand the feelings stirring inside her, but she was aware of them, and she couldn't ignore the subtle pull she felt toward Jacob. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and calm. "You've adapted well to this life. Most people find it harder than they expect, but you handle it naturally." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I'm learning a lot. It's different from what I'm used to, but I like it." Jacob nodded, and for a moment they simply stood together, the quiet of the night surrounding them. Clara realized that there was something unspoken between them, a subtle connection that had been growing over the past days. It wasn't words or actions, not yet. It was awareness, attention, and a shared understanding that they were both aware of the energy building between them. As she returned to her cabin, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the day, the work, the animals, the sense of accomplishment, and the quiet moments with Jacob. She felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and curiosity. There was a connection forming, something that neither of them had named, but it was undeniable. She realized that her time on the ranch was already changing her, teaching her about responsibility, resilience, and the subtle power of presence. That night, as she lay in bed, she replayed the day in her mind. She thought about the way Jacob had guided her, the way he had observed her, and the quiet moments they had shared. She felt a strange sense of anticipation, a curiosity about what might come next. Life on the ranch was demanding, yes, but it was also rich with experience, connection, and discovery. And Clara knew that she was only beginning to understand the depth of what this summer might bring. In the quiet hours before sleep, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to work hard, to learn as much as she could, and to embrace the unexpected challenges and lessons of ranch life. She didn't yet understand the subtle connection forming between her and Jacob, but she was aware of it, and she would pay attention to it without letting it distract her from her purpose. The night was calm, the stars bright, and the ranch alive with the quiet sounds of life. Clara drifted to sleep with a mixture of exhaustion and contentment, knowing that tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, and perhaps new moments that would shape her understanding of this place and of herself. The days on the ranch were unfolding in ways she hadn't anticipated, and she was beginning to see that this summer would leave a mark on her that she could not yet predict. Clara's days on the ranch had grown into a rhythm she now understood. She woke before sunrise, moved with the pace of the animals, and felt a sense of accomplishment in the simple, steady work that filled her hours. Yet, despite the comfort of routine, there was an undercurrent of tension she could not ignore, a quiet awareness whenever Jacob was near, the way his attention seemed to linger just a fraction longer than it should. She tried to push the thought aside, reminding herself that she was here to work, to learn, and to grow. But she could not deny the curious pull that made her heart beat faster, the subtle energy that passed between them like an invisible thread. One late afternoon, after a long day of feeding the animals and repairing fences, Jacob suggested they check the far end of the property, where some of the older horse paddocks needed inspection. Clara followed him across the fields, the golden light of the setting sun painting the hills and fences in warm tones. The air smelled of grass, earth, and the faint musk of the animals nearby. It was peaceful, almost serene, and yet Clara felt a heightened awareness of everything around her, of the land, of the animals, and of Jacob walking beside her. They worked quietly, tending to the horses and checking the fences. Clara was learning to move with confidence, to understand the subtle cues of the animals, and to anticipate problems before they became serious. Jacob observed her closely, occasionally offering guidance or a gentle word of encouragement. Each time their hands brushed while passing a tool or lifting a post, Clara felt a small spark of warmth, though she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. She knew she could not let her thoughts wander too far. The work was important, and the animals depended on them. As the sun dipped lower, the sky turned shades of pink and orange, and the temperature began to cool. Jacob paused, leaning against a fence post, and motioned for Clara to join him. She approached cautiously, feeling the quiet tension in the air. For a moment, neither spoke, both simply watching the horses graze in the fading light. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt like a shared understanding, a moment of stillness in the middle of a busy day. "You've learned quickly," Jacob said finally, his voice calm but deliberate. "Most people struggle for weeks to get a feel for the animals and the land. You're doing well." Clara felt a rush of pride and relief. "Thank you," she replied softly. "It's different from anything I've done before, but I enjoy it. I like being here." Jacob nodded, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment longer than usual. There was a subtle intensity in his gaze, something that made her pulse quicken, though it was not threatening, simply observant, aware, and present. Clara felt a mix of curiosity and caution. She could not explain why she felt drawn to him, why a simple glance made her feel nervous and intrigued at the same time. She reminded herself to focus on the work, to continue learning and growing, but she could not ignore the awareness that something was shifting between them. After a few minutes, Jacob suggested they take a short break. He led her to a shaded area near a grove of trees where they could sit and rest. Clara sank down onto the grass, feeling the cool earth beneath her and the gentle breeze against her skin. She took a deep breath, letting the quietness of the moment settle around her. The ranch felt different in these evening hours, calm, soft, almost magical in the way the fading light highlighted the fields and trees. Jacob sat beside her, close but respectful, and they watched the horizon together. The horses moved lazily in the paddock, their silhouettes outlined by the last rays of sunlight. Clara felt a sense of peace, mixed with anticipation she could not fully name. She realized that she was drawn to Jacob not just because of his strength or skill, but because of his calm presence, his patience, and the quiet way he seemed to notice everything without rushing. "You're adjusting well," Jacob said again, breaking the comfortable silence. "You've got patience, and that's important here. Not everyone does." Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I've learned a lot from watching you," she admitted. "You make it look easy, but I can see how much thought and care it takes." Jacob's expression softened, and for a moment the intensity in his gaze was replaced with something gentler. "It does take care," he said. "Every animal, every fence, every task, it matters. You're noticing that, and it makes a difference." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of connection. In that quiet moment, she realized that the ranch was not just a place of work. It was a place of learning, of awareness, and of subtle, shared understanding. As the sun finally disappeared behind the hills, the first stars began to appear, twinkling faintly in the deepening blue sky. Clara stood, brushing the dust from her clothes, and Jacob followed her lead. "We should head back," he said. "Dinner will be ready soon, and it's getting cooler." Clara agreed, though a small part of her wished they could stay a little longer, to watch the night settle over the fields in silence. Walking back to the main house, Clara felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The day had been long and demanding, but it had also been rewarding. She had learned new skills, gained confidence, and felt a growing awareness of the subtle connection forming between her and Jacob. It was not a connection she fully understood, but it was real, and she could not ignore it. That night, after finishing her chores and preparing for bed, Clara stepped outside one last time. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the scent of grass and the soft sounds of nocturnal life. She walked to the edge of the pasture, looking out over the darkened fields. the stars reflected in her eyes, and she felt a quiet sense of wonder. Life on the ranch was demanding, yes, but it was also beautiful in ways she had never anticipated. Jacob appeared a few minutes later, standing quietly beside her. He didn't speak at first, simply observing the night alongside her. Clara felt a flutter of nervousness and curiosity. She had grown used to his presence during the day, but the quiet night, the open space, and the soft light of the stars made everything feel more intimate, more immediate. Finally, Jacob spoke, his voice calm and thoughtful. "The night here is different from the city, isn't it? Quiet but full of life." Clara nodded. "It's beautiful, peaceful, but alive at the same time. I like it here." There was a pause, and then he said, "I've noticed you. You work hard, you pay attention, and you have patience. Those are rare qualities. You handle this place well, Clara." She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and something she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she replied softly. "I've learned a lot. From you and from the ranch itself." Jacob's gaze lingered on her, calm but intense. There was a silent acknowledgement in the way he looked at her, a recognition of something unspoken between them. Clara felt a shiver of anticipation mixed with nervousness, aware that this moment, this quiet night, held a significance she could not yet understand. They stood together for a while longer, watching the stars, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch, and feeling the quiet presence of each other. It was a moment of shared understanding, of awareness, and of subtle connection that neither could deny. Clara realized that the ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of learning, of discovery, and of growing awareness of herself and of others. Eventually, they turned to walk back toward the main house, the cool night air brushing against their skin. Clara's heart still felt full of anticipation, but she also felt a sense of calm, knowing that she was part of the rhythm of the ranch, part of its life, and part of the small, growing connection with Jacob. That night, as she lay in her cabin, Clara replayed the day in her mind, the work, the quiet moments, the subtle glances, and the growing awareness of Jacob's presence. She felt a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and a little nervousness. Life on the ranch was challenging, yes, but it was also filled with moments of beauty, learning, and connection. And she knew that the days ahead would continue to teach her about responsibility, observation, and the unexpected ways people can affect one another. Sleep came slowly that night, with Clara's thoughts drifting between the day's work, the quiet beauty of the night, and the subtle, unspoken tension that had grown between her and Jacob. She knew that this summer on the ranch was changing her in ways she could not yet predict, shaping her understanding of herself, the land, and the people who lived and worked in this unique, demanding world. The ranch, under the soft glow of the moon, seemed alive with possibility. Clara realized that she was no longer just a visitor or a worker. She was part of something larger, a rhythm of life that was both challenging and rewarding. And though she could not yet name the connection she felt with Jacob, she knew it was there, quiet but undeniable, shaping her experience in ways she would come to understand in the days ahead. The next morning, Clara woke to the familiar sounds of the ranch, the soft lowing of cows, the distant neigh of horses, and the rhythmic creak of the windmill turning slowly in the gentle breeze. The night had been quiet, but the memory of the previous evening lingered in her mind. She had felt a closeness with Jacob that she could not fully explain. It was not just attraction, but a shared understanding, a connection born from working together, from observing each other, and from the quiet moments when words were unnecessary. She dressed quickly and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The sky was painted with soft hues of pink and orange, and the air smelled fresh and alive. Clara could see Jacob already in the fields, tending to the animals. He moved with his usual calm efficiency, guiding a horse toward the stable with gentle authority. Clara felt a mix of admiration and quiet nervousness. He noticed her immediately, giving a brief nod before continuing with his work. That simple acknowledgement made her heart flutter. The morning chores were familiar now, but Clara approached them with a renewed sense of purpose. She fed the animals, checked fences, and helped with the maintenance of the barns. Jacob stayed nearby, occasionally offering guidance or advice. There was a subtle difference in his demeanor today, a softness in his eyes, a calm attentiveness that made Clara feel seen, respected, and quietly supported. She realized that over the past few weeks, the bond between them had grown stronger, not through words or grand gestures, but through shared effort, trust, and understanding. After the morning work, Jacob suggested they take a short break by the edge of the pasture, where a small grove of trees offered shade. They sat together on a fallen log, sipping water and listening to the sounds of the ranch. For a few moments, neither spoke, and the silence was comforting, filled with a quiet understanding that needed no words. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not experienced before, a feeling of being in the right place at the right time, doing something meaningful. "You've grown comfortable here," Jacob said finally, his voice calm and steady. "Not everyone adjusts so quickly to this life." Clara smiled, feeling a warm sense of pride. "It's been challenging," she admitted, "but I like it. I like learning and I like the animals. They make the work feel worth it." Jacob nodded, his eyes softening as they met hers. "You've learned more than most would in weeks," he said. "You pay attention, you listen, and you respect the work. That's important." Clara felt a flush of warmth at his words, and for a moment she simply enjoyed the quiet presence between them. It was a connection built not on words, but on shared experiences and subtle understanding. As the afternoon approached, Clara continued her tasks with renewed focus. She repaired fences, cleaned stalls, and guided the horses back to their paddocks. Jacob observed her occasionally, giving guidance when necessary, but mostly allowing her to work independently. The trust he showed her reinforced her confidence, and she realized that their connection was built on respect, patience, and the shared rhythm of life on the ranch. Later, as the sun began to set, Clara and Jacob walked together across the fields, checking the far pastures before returning to the main house. The sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, and the air was calm and cool. Clara noticed how naturally Jacob moved through the land, how he seemed to understand every curve of the fields, every habit of the animals, and how he led with quiet authority. She felt inspired, not just by his skill, but by his care and dedication. When they reached the main house, Jacob turned to her. "You've done well," he said simply. "Not just with the work, but with the way you approach everything here. You notice details, you respect the animals, and you keep learning." "That's not easy," Clara smiled shyly, feeling a quiet satisfaction. "Thank you," she replied. "I've learned a lot from you and from this place. I never imagined I could feel so connected to the land, the animals, and even the people here." Jacob's gaze softened. "You belong here, at least for now," he said. "And I think the ranch belongs to you too, in a way. You've brought energy, curiosity, and care that this place needed." Clara felt a warm glow spread through her chest. She realized that the ranch had become more than just a summer job. It had become a place where she could grow, learn, and feel a sense of purpose. That evening, after finishing chores and preparing for bed, Clara stepped outside once more. The sky was dark, sprinkled with stars that seemed brighter than any she had seen in the city. The ranch was quiet but full of life, the soft sounds of animals, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle hum of the night. Clara felt a sense of reflection, thinking about how much she had grown since her first day. She had learned skills, gained confidence, and discovered a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Jacob joined her quietly, standing beside her as they watched the stars together. There was no need for words. The quiet presence between them spoke volumes, a subtle understanding that had grown over time. Clara realized that their connection was built on trust, respect, and shared experience, rather than hurried emotions or fleeting gestures. It was steady, patient, and meaningful. After a few minutes, Jacob spoke softly. "You've changed since you arrived," he said. "Not just in the work, but in the way you approach life here. You notice details, you adapt, and you care." "That makes a difference," Clara smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and warmth. "I've learned from you," she replied. "From your patience, your skill, and the way you treat everything here with respect." Jacob nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "Good," he said. "That's what I hoped for. This place teaches more than just work. It teaches awareness, responsibility, and understanding. You've taken that to heart." Clara felt a quiet sense of completion. She realized that the summer on the ranch had shaped her in ways she could not have predicted. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of herself and others. The days passed, and Clara continued her routine, working hard and learning from Jacob and the land. She grew more confident in her abilities, more observant of the animals, and more attuned to the rhythms of ranch life. The connection she shared with Jacob remained subtle but present, built on mutual respect and understanding rather than hurried words or actions. It was a quiet bond, but one that shaped her experience profoundly. By the end of the summer, Clara could move through the ranch with confidence, tending to the animals and completing tasks with skill and care. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had contributed meaningfully to the life of the ranch. Jacob continued to guide her, observing her work and offering subtle encouragement. Their quiet understanding had become natural, a part of the daily rhythm of the ranch. On her last night, Clara walked to the edge of the pasture, looking out over the fields one final time. The sky was dark, filled with stars, and the ranch was calm. She reflected on the summer, the work, the learning, the challenges, and the quiet moments of connection with Jacob. She realized that the experience had left a lasting mark on her, shaping her understanding of responsibility, awareness, and human connection. Jacob joined her, standing quietly as they watched the stars together. There was a sense of closure, a recognition that this chapter of their lives had been meaningful and transformative. Clara felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned, for the animals she had cared for, and for the subtle, steady bond she had shared with Jacob. "You've done well," Jacob said softly, his voice calm and steady. "This place and the work you've done will stay with you, and I hope the lessons you've learned here will too." Clara nodded, feeling a deep sense of understanding and appreciation. "They will," she replied. "I'll carry this experience with me always." As she returned to her cabin that final night, Clara felt a mixture of sadness and fulfillment. The summer on the ranch had been challenging, rewarding, and transformative. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of herself and the world around her. She had learned the value of patience, observation, and care, and she had discovered a quiet, meaningful connection that would remain with her long after she left. Clara lay in bed, listening to the soft night sounds, feeling a sense of peace. The ranch had become a place of growth, learning, and subtle connection. She had arrived uncertain and tentative, and she was leaving with a sense of accomplishment and self-awareness she had never expected. The summer had been more than work. It had been an education in life, understanding, and quiet human connection. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara knew that this summer on the ranch would stay with her forever. The land, the animals, the work, and the quiet bond she had shared with Jacob had left an imprint on her heart and mind. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the experience and a quiet assurance that the lessons she had learned would guide her in the days and years to come. The ranch, under the soft glow of the moon and the twinkling stars, seemed alive with possibility. Clara realized that she had not only found work, but a place where she could grow, learn, and discover herself. And as she drifted to sleep, she carried with her the understanding that the summer on the ranch had been a chapter of transformation, awareness, and quiet connection that would never be forgotten.